There's something about the rain, isn't there? The steady, rhythmic drumming on the roof should be comforting. A sound that lulls us to sleep, but sometimes it does the opposite. On a dark night, when the world outside is a wash of black and gray, the rain doesn't feel like a blanket. It feels like a curtain. It isolates you. It muffles the sounds of the normal world and amplifies the sounds that don't belong. It turns familiar reflections into strange, distorted figures. Tonight, we're going to pull back that curtain. These aren't just spooky tales. These are 3 chilling, allegedly true stories from people who found themselves trapped in the middle of a storm, wishing for the silence of a clear night. So, turn down the lights, get comfortable, and listen to the rain. Let's begin. Our first story comes from a man named Marcus, a retired long-haul truck driver. For over 30 years, Marcus knew the highways of America better than his own backyard. He'd seen it all: blizzards, desert heat waves, and 1,000 lonely nights. But one particular night, in the autumn of 1998, on a desolate stretch of Route 119 in West Virginia, he had an experience that he still can't explain. An experience that made him change his route for the rest of his career. The rain started just after dusk. Not a drizzle, but a torrential, blinding downpour. The kind that makes your windshield wipers fight a losing battle. Marcus was in his 18-wheeler, the cab a small, warm bubble against the raging storm. The rhythmic thump of the wipers and the drone of the engine were his only companions. He was miles from the nearest town, surrounded by nothing but dense, dark forest on either side of the slick asphalt. Around 2 a.m., through the sheets of rain, his headlights caught something on the shoulder of the road ahead. It was a figure, just standing there. Marcus slowed down, his heart rate picking up. It was a woman. She was wearing a simple, old-fashioned dress that was soaked through, clinging to her thin frame. Her long, dark hair was plastered to her face. She wasn't trying to flag him down. She wasn't moving at all. She was just standing there, facing the road, her head slightly tilted as if listening to something only she could hear. Marcus's training and common sense screamed at him not to stop. It was too dangerous, too strange. He kept driving, his eyes locked on her in the rearview mirror until the rain and darkness swallowed her up. He shook his head, trying to rationalize a troubled person, a prank, anything. He pushed the thought from his mind and focused on the road. Maybe 15-20 minutes later, a good 10 miles down the road, his headlights hit another figure on the shoulder. As he got closer, a cold dread washed over him. It was the same woman, same drenched dress, same long, dark hair. It was impossible. There were no side roads, no houses, just dense, impenetrable woods. He hadn't seen any other cars pass him. There was no way she could have gotten ahead of him. This time, as he passed, she turned her head. Her face was pale, almost luminous in the headlights. But it was her eyes that made Marcus's blood run cold. They were wide, dark, and utterly empty. There was no panic, no plea for help, just a vacant, unnerving stare that seemed to look right through it. He floored it. The big diesel engine roared, but it felt like he was crawling. His hands were slick with sweat on the steering wheel. He didn't look in his mirrors this time. He didn't want to know if she was there. He just wanted to get to the lights of a town, a truck stop, anywhere. The next hour was agony. Every shadow, every road sign looked like her. Finally, he saw the blessed, hazy glow of a 24-hour truck stop. He pulled his rig into the lot, the air brakes hissing in protest, and killed the engine. The silence in the cab was deafening, broken only by the relentless drumming of the rain. He sat there for a long time, shaking. He never drove that stretch of Route 119 at night again. He'd tell other drivers about it, and a few old-timers would nod and say that road has stories. They'd call it one of those truly terrifying rainy night horror stories that you hear from veterans of the road, a warning to new drivers. But for Marcus, it wasn't a story. It was a memory, etched into his mind, of the woman with the empty eyes, waiting on the side of a lonely, rain-slicked road. Sometimes, the horror isn't found on a desolate highway, but in a place that's supposed to be a sanctuary, a place of peace and seclusion. Our second story is from a couple, Sarah and Ben, who decided to rent a remote cabin in the Pacific Northwest for a weekend getaway. They wanted to disconnect, to be surrounded by the quiet of the forest. They got the quiet they wanted, but it was a silence filled with a growing, suffocating dread. The cabin was perfect, tucked away down a long, winding dirt road miles from anyone. It was rustic, cozy, with a large stone fireplace and big picture windows that looked out into a sea of ancient pine trees. The first day was idyllic, but on the second night, the weather turned. The sky opened up, and a storm rolled in, even more violent than the forecast had predicted. Around 10 p.m., the power flickered and died, plunging them into absolute darkness, save for the fire they had crackling in the hearth. The rain was hammering against the roof now, a deafening, constant roar. It was kind of romantic at first. Just the two of them, the fire, and the storm. Then, Sarah heard it, a soft tap, tapping. "Did you hear that?" she whispered to Ben. Ben strained to listen over the storm. "I don't hear anything, honey. It's probably just a branch hitting the roof." Sarah tried to believe him. The wind was howling, and the forest was alive with noise. But the sound came again. Tap, tap, tap. It wasn't random like a branch. It was methodical, rhythmic, and it wasn't coming from the roof. It was coming from the side of the cabin, from one of the windows in the spare bedroom. Ben heard it that time. He got up and grabbed a heavy flashlight from the mantelpiece. "I'll go check. Probably just an animal." He walked into the dark hallway, the beam of the flashlight cutting a nervous path in front of him. Sarah stayed by the fire, her arms wrapped around herself. She heard Ben's footsteps stop. A long silence. Then he came back into the living room, his face pale in the firelight. "There's nothing there," he said, his voice a little too forced. "The window was fine. Nothing." They sat in silence for a while, pretending to be calm. But then the tapping started again. This time, it was closer. Tap, tap, tap. It was on the living room window now, the big picture window right next to them. It was impossible to ignore. It was a clear, deliberate sound, distinct from the chaos of the storm. It was like someone was standing just outside, patiently rapping on the glass with a single fingernail. Panic began to set in. They were miles from help. The phones were dead. They were utterly, completely alone. Who would be out here, in this storm, in the middle of the night? Ben grabbed a heavy iron poker from the fireplace, his knuckles white. They both stared at the window, a black mirror reflecting the dancing flames of the fire. They couldn't see anything outside but darkness, and the rain streaming down the glass. The tapping stopped. For a full minute, there was only the sound of the rain and their own ragged breathing. And then, a new sound, a slow, wet, scraping sound, moving along the side of the cabin towards the front door. They didn't wait to see what would happen next. In a shared, silent panic, they ran to the back door in the kitchen, fumbled with the lock, and burst out into the freezing rain. They didn't stop to grab coats or shoes. They just ran. They sprinted through the mud and the dark, down the long dirt road, fueled by pure adrenaline and terror. They didn't look back. They ran until their lungs burned and the lights of their car came into view. They drove all night, only stopping when the sun began to rise, and they were 100 miles away. They never went back to the cabin. The rental company called a week later, asking why they'd left the place in such a hurry. Ben just said there was a family emergency. He later learned from an online forum that other visitors to that area had reported strange occurrences, especially during bad weather. Many described it as one of those classic unexplained encounters that sound like fiction until it happens to you. For Sarah and Ben, the sound of rain is no longer comforting. It's a reminder of the night they were hunted by something they never saw, and the patient, rhythmic tapping that still echoes in their nightmares. For our final story, we move from the wilderness to the heart of the city. It goes to show that horror isn't about location. You don't need to be isolated in the woods to feel true, paralyzing fear. Sometimes, it can find you in a high-rise apartment, surrounded by a million people, none of whom can help you. This experience comes from a young woman named Chloe, who was living on the 14th floor of an apartment building in Chicago. Chloe loved storms. She especially loved watching them from her apartment. Her living room had a massive floor-to-ceiling window that gave her a stunning, panoramic view of the city skyline. On this particular night, a massive thunderstorm was rolling in off Lake Michigan. The sky was a bruised purple, and lightning spiderwebbed across the clouds. She made some tea, turned off all the lights in her apartment, and sat on the floor, mesmerized by the show. The rain began to lash against the glass, distorting the city lights into long, shimmering streaks of color. It was beautiful and violent. For a while, she just watched. As she stared out, she became aware of her own reflection in the glass, a faint silhouette against the backdrop of the storm. Behind her reflection, she could see the dark, empty space of her own living room. The couch, the lamp, the doorway to the hall, and the figure standing in the corner. Her heart stopped. In the reflection, standing near her bookshelf in the darkest corner of the room, was a tall, slender shape. A man. It was just a silhouette, but it was unmistakably human. Her first reaction was a jolt of pure, electric terror. She whipped her head around, her eyes darting to the corner of the real room behind her. There was nothing there, just the bookshelf, just shadows. Her breathing was shallow. She told herself it was a trick of the light, a reflection of a reflection, a strange shadow cast by the lightning. It had to be. She turned her head back to the window, slowly, hesitantly. It was still there, in the reflection. The dark figure was still standing in the corner of her reflected room, motionless. She started a desperate, panicked inventory. The door was locked. She'd checked it twice. The windows don't open on the 14th floor. No one could have gotten in. This was impossible. She was seeing things, but her eyes were not lying. In the real world, the corner was empty. In the world on the other side of the glass, she was not alone. This was one of those unexplained encounters that defy all logic. She stared, frozen, for what felt like an eternity. The figure in the reflection did not move. It just stood there, watching. Then, as a flash of lightning illuminated the sky, the figure in the reflection moved. It slowly lifted its head to look directly at her reflection. And then it raised a hand and waved. A slow, deliberate wave. But behind her, in the real room, there was nothing. No movement. No sound but the storm and the pounding of her own heart. That broke the spell. A scream caught in Chloe's throat. She scrambled backwards, away from the window, crab walking across the floor until her back hit the opposite wall. She didn't take her eyes off the window. The figure in the reflection was still there, its hand still raised. She grabbed her phone and keys and fled. She didn't even put on shoes. She ran out of her apartment, down the emergency stairs, not stopping until she was in the brightly lit lobby, surrounded by the noise and safety of the real world. She called the police, who came and searched her apartment thoroughly. They found nothing. No signs of a break-in. No one hiding in the closets or under the bed. To them, she was just a hysterical woman. Chloe never spent another night in that apartment. She broke her lease and moved. She can't look out of windows on rainy nights anymore. She can't stand to see her own reflection in the dark, because she knows that sometimes the reflection shows you more than what's really there. It shows you what's standing right behind you in a place you can't see, waiting patiently in the dark. The rain eventually stops. The sun comes out, and the world returns to normal. But for those who have experienced something inexplicable in the heart of a storm, the sound of rain is never quite the same. It becomes a reminder A reminder that when the world is dark and loud, the things we can't see or can't explain feel so much closer. What about you? Do you have any rainy night horror stories of your own? Share them in the comments below. We'd love to read them. And if you enjoyed being terrified with us tonight and want more chilling, true stories, please be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss what's coming next. Until next time, stay safe and perhaps keep a light on when it storms.